and welcome to the Data Center Podcast, brought to you by BizClick and our sponsors for this series, the Data Center Magazine. Are you ready to plug into the future of digital infrastructure? Well, you've come to the right place, because on the Data Center Podcast, we're exploring a world where connectivity is faster, storage is smarter, and the digital landscape is consistently evolving. Every week, we bring you straight to the source, interviewing the innovators, the engineers, and the brilliant minds building and operating the facilities that power the modern world. If you're curious about how the physical backbone of the internet is actually changing our lives, then you're in the right place. But first, we'll start with a nice easy question.
Okay.
Can you tell me who you are and what you do?
Oh, well, that's a very easy question, actually. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Steve Bowes-Phipps. I work for State Street Bank and Trust, which is an end user, obviously, of data centers rather than a data center provider. We own a portfolio of data center footprint across the globe, mostly indirectly, but we do still have some on-prem that we use. I'm a vice president responsible for global processes across the data centers and risk assessments. So I've got a huge expertise and experience in data centers that goes all the way back to when I was actually just doing industrial training back a long time ago. I'm not going to say when.
So no, tell me about that background then. So what got you involved in data centers and in that sort of sector?
Well, it's funny because when I was growing up, and computers were quite a new thing still, and I got interested in the fact that you could do programming, right, which we now call coding, obviously. And I thought, wow, people seem to earn a lot of money doing that. I'm really interested in computers.
And money.
I had a Sinclair ZX81 and a Sinclair Spectrum, and these were the coolest things at the time, and I thought, well, I'd like to do that. And then so I eventually went to Polytechnic, it was then, became a university later, University of Hertfordshire. And I did an HND. I didn't quite get the grades for a degree, but it just shows that if you persevere, you can still achieve what you want to achieve. And it was a sandwich course. So I spent a year, obviously, at Poly, and I had a year out in industry, and then I had a year to finish off at the end, so a 3-year course. And that year out in industry, I applied to a large indigenous computer manufacturer, which was a kind of competitor to IBM at the time, but it was a UK version called ICL, and they sold computers globally. Pretty much all government departments owned them. And I went to work for their support center, and the first thing they did was they stuck me in a computer room. And they said, right, this is yours. Look after this. Everybody relies on the stuff that's in here in order to do our job. So, you now look after it. And that essentially was my first data center, this computer room, and I just happened to have fallen into data centers ever since, really, and it's so much more fun than actual coding, because I was really put off by the time I'd come out of my years industrial training. I said, this is fun, supporting people and looking after this equipment and stuff. It's much more fun than sitting in front of a terminal and coding all day. So that's kind of where I came from.
So how then has the data center evolved since you've been in data centers?
You see, if you looked at a computer room in those days, right, you didn't care where you put the equipment. You just stuck it in a convenient place, and a Sparky would come along and plug it in. Mm-hmm. So it's got power. The general split air conditioning units in the room that would keep it cool. Wasn't really generating much power. Took much heat rather. So it was all a lot of it was around connectivity, to be honest. It was all about, how could you get the connections from the computer back to the terminals that people were using on their desks and stuff like that. Those were a lot of the challenges that we had, and keeping the systems up and running. But then, when I got a job in a bank in Chester, a credit card bank, which is quite quite well known MBNA, and I was looking after all their back end processing in Europe. And one day I walked into the IT director's office, and he said, "I'm going to promote you, Steve. And by the way, you're now looking after the data center." Right? So I'd gone from a user of the data center that we had to now I've got to look after it. And it was a bit more complicated in those days. There's a lot more electricity. We arranged things in rows, and we didn't have containment. It wasn't those days. We're talking kind of middle 90s. So I was learning and I was going along, and it was fascinating because I've got an IT operations background, an IT background, not a facilities management background. So I'm not an engineer. I've just learned by osmosis a lot of the stuff that they do, so I can keep up with their conversations. But I'm not going to sit there and work out the coefficient of, how much pressure the air needs to be delivered at in order to remove so much heat from the servers. So I just know the best practices around how to do that, rather than to work it out myself. But it's an amazing industry. I mean, there's so much innovation going on, and you don't see it. If you've taken to a data center, you walk around and you go, well, there's a lot of white panels and
wires
and boxes and wires. Yeah. And where's the innovation here? And you don't see it, but it's there, and it's the way that things are laid out, it's the way that things are constructed, it's the way that things are performing based on what the power goes in and what comes out at the end, and there's this huge amount going on, and obviously I'm quite passionate about it because I've worked in it all my life, but I love it. I used to take some graduates around. When I worked for a consultancy, we had graduate every year. We had a cohort of graduates that would join. I used to take them around the data center. I'd call up somebody I knew in the local data center. I'd say, "Can I bring them around?" And they'd always put the most inspiring engineer on the tour, and he'd be like, "Oh, we can do this and we do that, and this is great, it's fantastic," And they all walk out going, "Wow.
I can't wait to work in a data center."
Yes, exactly. They went from, "I don't want to go in a data center," to, "Wow, it's so interesting."
But that's probably massively helped in terms of recruiting into data centers.
Yeah. I mean, there was a guy, he was an engineer, and he didn't want anything to do with engineering. He joined us, as a consultancy, and we needed to bring the next level of consultants up, right? And it's very difficult to find consultants. Consultants need to have quite a good lot of in-depth experience, right, around a particular subject, right? And data centers are a particularly difficult subject if you haven't worked in one. And so this guy, we said to him, "Look, we're doing some data center work. Will you come along and support us?" I said, "Oh, I'm not sure. We don't be in data centers." So I quite fancy marketing or something. It's like, really? And we got him along, and he started to love it. And then we got him onto a customer site where he was doing commissioning, and he started to run the whole commissioning at this new site where he was turning up these new white spaces in the data center. And I was talking to him, and he said, "Oh, I absolutely love it. Thank you for introducing me to it." So it was great, and he earns really well now. He's using his skills that he learned at university, and he's earning good money for that, and he's got a really varied job. He goes abroad and just and it really inspires me to see young people doing that, because I fell into it by accident. He could probably say that he fell into it by accident, right? But actually, I think
you manufactured that.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're here obviously at the London Summit. Tell me what you've been talking about today on stage.
So because of my career in data centers, I've always been interested in all aspects of sustainability, of the impact it has on society, economics and everything. That's always, I like to take a kind of 1,000-foot view of what's going on. in the data center industry, and I've always been fascinated by that. And it struck me that every time I was going to conferences, people were talking about building AI data centers, right? And that's all they talked about. And you know why that is? It's all engineers. It's all engineers. I mean, I love engineers, right? They're great people.
Well, we need them.
And we definitely need them. But you know what? They see a problem, they try to solve it. A bit like, that's why my wife never asks me or tells me anything, should I say. She never tells me anything because she knows I'm going to try and solve the problem she's got.
I have the same thing with my husband.
She doesn't want to know. She doesn't want a solution. She just wants to tell me.
We want an ear.
Exactly. And I can't do that. I have to think of what the solution might be. So it's very difficult. So, but the engineers are just like that. Engineers, they want to solve every problem. So this is fantastic for them, right? The era of Gen AI, we've got issues around power distribution. We've got issues around cooling, the cabinets, the cabling that needs to go into those cabinets, and engineers don't ask why. What they want to do is, can I solve it? Can I solve these problems? And they have great fun doing that. But I sit back, because I'm not an engineer, and I go, why? Why are we building all these data centers? What is going to be their purpose? Are they even making any money? And the answer is no. Right? Has OpenAI never ever made a profit? No. Has Anthropic ever made a profit? No. Right? Google Gemini? No. None of them made profits. So they're building out capacity, but not paying attention to the economics, because they think that, like the Field of Dreams, right? If they build it,
the money will follow.
The money will follow. And I'm afraid I don't agree. And therefore I wrote this presentation to kind of say, look, if you look at it from the outside, don't bet your shirt on a technology that in 5 years' time may not exist.
In a world driven by AI, cloud computing and massive scale, the digital infrastructure industry never stops moving. But are you keeping pace? Stay ahead of the curve with Data Center Magazine, your ultimate global hub for data center insights. From sustainability and cooling innovations to edge computing and cyber security, we bring you the exclusive interviews with the industry's giants, deep dive features, and the latest breaking tech trends. Join the global community shaping the digital future. Visit datacentermagazine.com today to never miss an update. That's datacentermagazine.com. Do you think that about AI? Do you think in 5 years' time it's going to be, maybe a flash in the pan?
Well, no, I don't think that AI is going to disappear, but I think the technology that drives AI will disappear. I think NVIDIA are being clever, right? Because at first they were very single-minded, and they basically just wanted to produce GPUs because they knew they could sell them and they could make a lot of money. And Jensen Huang has, become a trillionaire or whatever on the back of it. But at the end of the day, that's a limited market, because technology will force change, and we can't continue to increase the amount of power that goes into a cabinet. It's just not possible. Right? The technical challenges are just so difficult to solve. Why do we want to do it anyway? Because out in the labs, IBM, for instance, are producing photonics, which is light. Right? So they're using light circuits rather than electronic circuits. And light circuits, as you can imagine, use hardly any electricity, right? Whereas electronic circuits use a huge amount. So if you can do everything by light, and I was reading an article in The Economist around glass etchings being used as inferencing circuits. I was thinking, that's a game changer. That's a game changer, because if we're using glass to create inferencing, why are we building data centers to support 2.7K watt superchips, right? when we can use glass that uses a fraction of that. And so that's why I think that technology will drive innovation in a different direction, and therefore people who are just building data centers are going to have to find another use for them.
Do you think people then get caught up in the new tech? So one of the things was the cloud. Many people rushed to the cloud to find.
Yeah, and how did that work?
To find it wasn't actually the magic fix that they expected. So from your perspective at State Street, what is the one thing a private data center can actually do better than the public cloud?
Well, this is a really interesting question, actually. And the reason it's an interesting question is because it's something that I've talked a lot about. I'll sound like I'm talking to myself, but, I'm not mad. Yes. What would you ever from Thursday? But I've changed my colleagues, and I changed myself, to say, we're on this strategy of moving to co-location pretty much, and avoiding on-prem altogether, because we don't want to be in the business of looking after data centers, right? Not the M&E, because we're a bank. So we want the compute, obviously. We want the data storage, obviously, right? But we don't want to have to be, managing HVAC and power and UPSs and generators and all that kind of stuff. Why should we have to worry about all that? We've got enough to worry about with our offices, or why worry about in data centers, where a lot of our realty guys don't have a huge amount of experience in, but we do. But the question is, what happens with AI? Because if our customers are demanding AI tools to help their investment strategies in a bank like ours, right? That's a very reasonable request, and something that we want to develop and offer our customers, because they're going to be getting it from everybody else, right?
Well, exactly. So you need to offer to stay competitive.
Exactly. You've got to offer the same. But the question is, where do you offer that from? Do you offer it from your on-prem? Do you offer it from co-location? Do you offer it from cloud? Now, most people, when they're dipping their toe in, will use cloud. But in the long run, that will kill you, because cloud charges for data ingress and egress. So putting all that data, that corporate data, into the cloud will kill you in terms of the costs, the expenses. And you've got to worry about data sovereignty. You've got to worry about data security. Right? Where's that going? Who's looking after it? What if our customers don't want us to send their data, even if it's anonymized, right? They really want that data to go into somewhere in the US or somewhere else, and particularly, Microsoft can't tell you where their data goes, and they can't prove it. So if you send stuff into an Azure database, for instance, you don't know if that's being replicated in Russia or China. Yeah. So we're a bank. We have to worry about those kinds of things. Those are things that are very high, up in our priorities in terms of making sure that we abide by all those kinds of rules and regulations. So you kind of say, well, so cloud really isn't. It's not a long-term strategy. It's never a long-term strategy for AI. So do you put it into colo, but then you're looking for a very specific type of colo to support those kinds of power requirements and those kinds of cooling requirements? None of our portfolio has that, so we have to go for new data centers somewhere, or the existing on-prem we still have. Do we redevelop it and turn it into AI-friendly, data center space? So I don't think we've certainly not made any decisions around that yet. It's not been driven yet to that degree. But I think a lot of organizations will be in a very similar position where they have to make those kinds of decisions. And the right decision is going to be based on what they have in terms of portfolio versus real estate, and whether or not they want to look after that or not themselves.
So looking ahead then, do you see a future where we've got power issues? So, the major hubs like Dublin and London, have we got enough power to be, giving people all these AI needs that they want?
Well, Ireland, yes, definitely has a problem with power. 18% of its power, its electrical grid, is being used for data centers. The US has a huge problem. The major conglomeration of data centers are in areas which already have a lot of data centers. And there's a study that I read recently, it's from 2024, but it's still relevant, that shows places in the US there the energy cost to residents, people, ordinary residents in those states where data centers have been built, are paying something like 22% more for a kilowatt of energy than other places. So it's a massive issue.
That kind of brings us back to your sustainability point. There could be a situation where the data center actually ends up being the beneficial partner in that and sells back or helps the neighbors with slightly cheaper energy.
Well, this is exactly the point, right? If we constantly talk about data centers being consumers of energy, then that's all people ever hear.
Mm.
Yeah. So when you say, we've got this much capacity in the grid, in the national grid, and data centers are taking up 18% of it, right, as in Ireland, people are ignoring the fact that, according to Landau's principle, which I say in my presentation, 99.97% of the electricity that goes into the data center comes out as waste heat.
Mm.
So why aren't we using that waste heat?
And harnessing it to,
exactly
up the profile.
There were companies like Deep Green, which is a UK company, which builds data centers next to leisure centers and takes the waste heat from the data center and puts it into a swimming pool.
Great idea.
And it reduces the cost of keeping the swimming pool warm, and it reduces the cost to taxpayers. And why wouldn't that be a fantastic idea? It's super, right? They've had success in doing it in a few areas in the UK. They've also, I recently read, they've done it in the US. So it's a fantastic idea, and they are improving the perception of what a data center actually is. It can be an energy provider. It can be a source of lower taxes to the local area, but you've got to position it in that way. Otherwise, people are just going to believe the negative.
It's a remarketing piece, really.
Definitely. And I'm not a marketer, and I like to talk passionately about it. Just think what would happen if we had a passionate marketer involved.
So obviously you've said that the industry's way of measuring efficiency is outdated.
Yeah.
So in simple terms, how should we actually be measuring whether a data center is being responsible towards the planet?
So there are a few different ways, right? Firstly, I think the data center providers need to be very transparent. They're not, right? Show me a large data center provider that is truly transparent about how much energy it uses, how it uses that energy, how it manages that energy with its customers. There isn't one, right? No way. And they use all these devices around RECs and carbon offsets and PPAs and VPPAs. These are just financial devices. They don't actually, they're not sustainable. They're not creating sustainability. If you're paying for a wind farm in Scotland, right, you're contributing to the problem of wind farms in Scotland. You're not actually solving anything. I was talking to a guy after my presentation today. I was talking to a guy down here who said that he owns a wind farm in Scotland, and he says he makes more money from the government paying him to turn off the wind turbines than he does from having the wind turbines running.
Wow.
Is your mind blown now?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds terrible.
So this is a disgrace, right? But there's no way of fixing it because it's so exorbitantly costly to get energy from where it's generated, which is out in the North Sea, to the south of the country, where it's mostly used. So you either have to build a huge number of data centers in Scotland, just pave over the whole country with data centers.
Nice and close.
Yeah, it was really close. Or you've got to find some other way of fixing that issue. And I've spoken to people who, for instance, are looking at taking the spare capacity from the wind farms and creating green hydrogen. Great idea. Rather than switch them off, well, keep them running and create hydrogen, which can then be used for hydrogen engines and stuff like that. You know, so there are ways of doing it, but we just need the government to be supportive in allowing the regulations and permitting to take account of this and allow funding to flow that way. But we also need people to be innovative and think about these things and supportive. You know, if there's people want to do this, clearly there's the demand for people to do this because they see a business opportunity, and I think that will change the market. So I don't think that's quite answered the question that you had in the beginning.
It's okay. We are massively running out of time, so I've just got one more question for you. So on our podcast, we like to ask you to ask the next person a question.
Okay.
But first, I'll pose the question to you that you were left, and that was, what is the most embarrassing thing you've ever done in a data center?
The most embarrassing thing I've ever done in a data center. It might be a bit technical.
Go technical.
Can it be technical?
It can be technical.
Okay. Let's hope none of my ex-bosses are watching that.
I can't get fired.
No, I can't get fired. You're right. So we had some consultants in. They were charging. I mean, and this is like the mid-90s, right? So they were charging £1,000 a day. We had 3 of them, and they were coding, and they were using one of my systems to do the coding on. And the project manager came to me. He said, "Can you take a backup of the what they're doing? Because it's costing us so much money. You know, we'll make sure we got secure backup." So I went, "You sure?" And I went to the data center. I've loaded a tape because in those days you had to do that manually. You know, so I loaded the tape. I typed the command on the console, and I thought, "Well, it's funny that the tape isn't going round. You know, it's not working." And I realised, rather than say, "Read this information output to tape," I put the chevrons the wrong way round. What I'd actually done is overwritten the entire area that they've been working on.
Oh no.
And so all that money down
well
the
spent.
drain. That's probably the most embarrassing thing I've ever done. And I've not admitted that publicly ever.
Well, now's the first.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, what would be your next question to our next guest?
If you could be an animal, what animal would you be?
Okay, we're going really deep on these podcasts. All right, well, thank you so much, Stephen.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Data Center Podcast. Before you go, don't forget we want to hear from you. Got a tough question about power usage effectiveness? A tricky issue with cooling optimization? Or maybe you're an industry leader with an incredible data center innovation story to share and you want to appear on the show? Send us your burning questions or your speaker pitch. You can easily drop us a line at editor@datacentermagazine.com. Please remember to email from your business email address. We'll be back next week to help you build bigger, run cooler, and maybe even achieve that zero carbon goal. Until then, keep those racks full and your bandwidth high. See you next time.